Welcome to The Hypnotist, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. This podcast features powerful hypnosis, so do not listen while driving or operating machinery. This recording is not suitable for those with epilepsy or severe mental health issues. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and in this episode of The Hypnotist, you're going to be listening to a hypnosis session created for a client that had gone through something very traumatic in their teenage years, in their kind of earlier life, that was still creating feelings of guilt, of shame, of anger. And this hypnosis session was designed to do two key things. One was to disassociate from any of the trauma. And one of the best ways of doing that is to observe a time in your life differently, almost from a third-person perspective. A lot of people tend to have memories and go back into a first-person perspective. So that was one element of desensitizing the trauma. But a lot of it was based on a frame of looking at things to take away a lot of the guilt and shame attached to what happened. Now, without breaking any confidentiality at all, which is, of course, paramount, this was a client that was raped as a teenager that led to a pregnancy, and an abortion that was linked to that pregnancy came quite late in the cycle. Now, as a result of that, this is a client that felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame attached to that decision, but it wasn't really her guilt and her shame to carry. Part of taking guilt and shame away from a memory is to ask yourself the question, knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently? And there are certain key things that she would have done differently. Perhaps not have trusted this person she thought was a friend. Perhaps she would have taken some kind of contraception or, let's say, morning after pill afterwards. Maybe she would have seen a doctor earlier on in the process. But she didn't know what was happening at the time. And because of that, she made the best decision she could at the time that she had evaluated what was going on. But in the culture of this particular client, her decision led to a lot of blame being attributed to her. So not only did she have the trauma of being raped, but she also had the trauma of being accused of being somehow morally corrupt. That can put salt in the wounds. So this session is designed to use regression in a way to change that perception and to create a feeling of forgiveness, not for the perpetrator, but for herself, to forgive herself for not knowing what to do and enabling her to take a lot of that guilt and shame away based on who she is now as a person. This was quite a difficult session to do with this client because it's difficult when there are, kind of unfairness that takes place. And there's a lot of things in life that aren't fair. What happened to this woman was not right, it was not fair, it was not justified. But it does come with a responsibility. And that responsibility is to make a choice. Do you want to live with this shame and guilt, or do you want to move forward and take ownership of your life again? And that's really what this session was designed to do. If you're listening to this and you've been, let's say, on the receiving end of something completely unfair, unjustified, and you're still struggling with that now, there will be a link in the show notes to schedule a free consultation call with me. For now, though, I'm not going to ask you to relax and enjoy the session. This is not necessarily an enjoyable session, but I hope it is useful or empowering for you in some way. Take a deep breath in. As you breathe in a resourceful feeling of relaxation. And as you exhale, just allow yourself to release perhaps a feeling of tension or stress in your outward breath. When you breathe in, allow that breath to be deeper than it normally would. Maybe taking 2 or 3 breaths on that inward breath. And as you exhale, what if you were to allow yourself to breathe out and then breathe out again, and maybe even a 3rd time, so that you're breathing 2 or 3 times deeper in and 2 or 3 times deeper out. And in doing so, you're activating your diaphragm. Not just breathing from your chest, but really filling your lungs. And as you exhale, accepting that that outward breath is not just an outward breath, that you are releasing. You've been holding on to things that weren't yours to hold. Shame, guilt, regret, stress. So I want you to imagine that you're breathing in a wonderful feeling of resourcefulness. But as you exhale, you're able to let go, to release. Whatever emotions come up, perhaps they need to come up. But I want you to imagine they're coming up to be released and to let go. I want you to create an image in your mind of a splinter, a tiny bit of wood that maybe at one point in your life got caught under your skin. I want you to get a sense that back then when that splinter was there, maybe you picked away at it with a needle, a pin, perhaps even your fingernails, until that tiny bit of wood came out of your skin and it wasn't there anymore, and it was painful in the moment. But when that splinter was finally left, you were able to heal. But I want you to imagine what would have happened if you never got that splinter out. That perhaps your skin healed over that wood, but it was infected, causing pain for years and years, simply because it wasn't taken out. And I want you to imagine that something has happened to you in your past that you've been holding on to that needs to be removed. There is an emotional splinter that is buried under your skin that might be painful to remove, but once it's removed, you can then properly heal. And if that makes sense to your unconscious mind, just let me know by nodding your head. So we need to go back in time to when this splinter actually happened. But I want you to imagine you're going to do this in a safe way. I want you to imagine the person that you are right now is climbing into a floating bubble, an impenetrable bubble. Imagine going into that bubble and going up, floating upwards, leaving your house, and imagine just going back in time. You are invisible in this bubble. You can see everything, but no one can see you or the bubble. And I want you to imagine going all the way back in time. Back in time, not just your teenage years, but even earlier. And I want you to observe things that happened in your childhood that shouldn't have happened in your childhood. I want you to witness them through the eyes that you have now seeing what happened to that childlike version of you, with all your knowledge of people, standards, rules, laws, and what's acceptable. And I want you to observe that what happened was not right, was not fair, that you were not to blame. No matter what labels were attempted to be stuck on you back then, had more to do with absolving others from the responsibility or guilt or shame that they should have carried. Sometimes calling someone the black sheep is just an excuse to do mean things to good people. But I want you to see that you as a child were blameless. You were brought up in an environment. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose where in the world you were living. And I want you to see a coping strategy that you had back then. That if you were called the black sheep, you were trying to be the white sheep. If you were said that you were bad, you were trying to be good. And perhaps that led to even more vulnerability. But I want you to observe and just accept that what happened was not right, was not fair, was not justified, but it shaped you in some way. You were creating beliefs and ideas all the way back then. And I want you to follow your timeline forwards. As a child, you became a teenager. And as a teenager, you needed that connection. Maybe you were trying to find things that were missing in your family, in friendships. And I want you to observe this need to be liked, accepted. And I want you to observe a time perhaps where you went away, maybe as a teenager. And I want you to observe from the safety of this bubble. You're invisible, you're just watching the events that led up to something completely unacceptable happening. I want you to see how perhaps you were influenced by people or maybe even drink. And I want you to observe something happening that should not have happened. And I want you to observe that you were vulnerable. And you did the best that you could in that situation. Situation you didn't choose and you didn't want. I want you to see the expression on your face: confusion, disorientation, surprise, and perhaps even disbelief. You didn't want to believe it, you didn't want to accept it. So you did what made you feel safe, almost ignored it. And I want you to follow that timeline. See what happened in the days, perhaps the weeks that followed. And knowing what you know now, there were clues as to a cause and effect relationship of that event. And knowing what you now know, you would have done things differently, but you didn't know that back then. I want you to see a young woman that was confused and unsure, but also not wanting to face certain elements of a reality. And that's understandable. And then I want you to see that going forwards in time to where you were forced to give a difficult decision. I want you to see someone that back then didn't have a lot of life experience. I want you to see a young woman that accurately weighed up the pros and cons of different decisions and made the best decision for them at that point in time. And if you believe that that was the right decision for them at that moment, just let me know by nodding your head. And then I want you to see, going forward, that young woman was carrying a lot of weight from that decision. Shame, guilt, the unfairness of judgment, perhaps even the baggage of cultural beliefs and judgment that they themselves carried, just growing up in a society where maybe there were certain religious beliefs, certain things about what's okay and what isn't okay. And I want you to feel a huge amount of empathy for this child, this young woman, that she was carrying the emotions that should have been carried by others. Was the guilt for this woman to carry, or someone else? Who should really experience the judgment in this situation? This young woman or someone else? I want you to get a sense that this young woman perhaps felt that she had to hold on to this emotion, because if she didn't, somehow she was condoning what happened, somehow she was accepting what happened, somehow she was complicit in what happened. And I want you to think, from the knowledge that you now have, how ridiculous that idea would be. But back then, it was an understandable, completely understandable belief. But people can believe things that aren't true. There was a time when you believed in tooth fairies and magic. And as you got older, you changed your beliefs and those emotions went away. And I want you to get a sense that, in a paradoxical way, the gravity of that situation gave you certain resources. That anger, that rage, that sense of unfairness propelled you into being highly resourceful and highly resilient in tough situations, that it actually changed your life trajectory. Perhaps, in a strange way, good things can happen from bad things. What if the independence that you now have came from needing to be independent? What if the strength that you now have came from learning when you weren't so strong? I want you to get a sense that that anger, that rage, perhaps even guilt that you felt back then was necessary to propel your life in a particular direction, but it serves its purpose now. To hold on to that weight when it served its purpose just holds you back. And I wonder what would happen if you let go of that weight. And the way to let go of the weight is to apply the wisdom to those moments in your life. So let's imagine going back in time again but now seeing yourself as a child with all the knowledge and experience and wisdom that you now have. I want you to see a child that perhaps would have done things differently growing up when unacceptable things were happening. Able to seek help, able to protect themselves maybe in a different way, having clearer boundaries, thinking for themselves, being less persuaded by the judgment of other people. I want you to see that child becoming stronger, more independent, speaking up. I want you to follow this child's life and see that knowing what you now know, perhaps that event that happened you could have avoided by not even going to that place, but you didn't know that at the time. And then after that event, perhaps knowing what you now know, you would have made different choices earlier on, but you didn't know what you know now then. I want you to feel empathy and forgiveness. And it's an easy person to forgive because you did the best you could with what you knew. And if you can feel that empathy, feel that forgiveness, feel that sympathy, the bad things can happen to good people. You didn't choose that, but you were forced to deal with it. And if you feel that you can forgive that younger version of yourself, let me know by nodding your head. That's right. I want you to imagine perhaps it's the day of a doctor's appointment. Maybe a clinic, maybe a hospital, maybe somewhere else. But I want you to imagine that just before whatever happened, you can freeze time. You can leave the bubble and you can meet that younger version of yourself just before you are about to have some kind of operation or maybe taking a pill or a tablet or something. And I want you to tell that younger version of you that they are doing the right thing, they're doing the necessary thing. That if they could have done it earlier, I'm sure they would, but they didn't know that then. I want you to tell that younger version of you that you didn't ask for this, that you know that this is an emotive time, but I want you to give them the advice from your experience now to that version of you back then. To hug them. To tell them that this is a lot of responsibility, a big burden for someone their age, but it's still the right thing to do. I want you to comfort that version of you when they're going through whatever they're going through. And maybe for a few days after, they're going through some kind of sickness or recovery. And I want you to imagine that you're there. You're there to help them create the true evaluations of what are happening, the actual beliefs. Anytime they feel guilty, let them know that this is not their guilt. Anytime they're feeling shame, tell them it's not their shame. I want you to give them a new lens to look at what happened, a new way of evaluating what happened that will still propel them into the life they want, but without carrying the heavy weight of that emotion. And when they've accepted your wisdom, your advice, your help in creating these evaluations, let me know by nodding your head. I want you to get a sense that time to let go. You've been carrying a heavy weight for a long time, but it wasn't your weight to carry. It's now time to let go of that weight and to replace it with acceptance. It's not the events that you're accepting, it's yourself that you're accepting. You're accepting that you did the best with what you knew at the time and the resources you had access to. And when you fully forgive yourself and accept yourself, imagine hugging yourself back then, and then let me know by nodding your head. And in letting go, you are subconsciously creating new doorways, new opportunities. You've been carrying a weight for a very long time. So in contrast, letting go of that weight is going to make you feel lighter, freer. Your best revenge is living your best life. A life free of guilt, free of shame, free of any burden. And if you're willing to take that type of a revenge, to live a life that you deserve, not to prove people wrong, but to just live your best life because you deserve it, let me know by nodding your head. And I want you to imagine you're still in that bubble, but you're going to you in the present and seeing your future from this point forwards. I want you to imagine observing your life where you've let go of the guilt, the shame, the regret, anything of the past, you've let go of it. Determined to live your best life. And I want you to observe what that would look like today, tomorrow, next week, and the week after that. You can tell it in your facial expression. You can tell it in the way you smile and the way you move. You can see it in how you're living your life. And when you think about the past, it almost feels like you're reading a character from a story. You know it happened, but it doesn't feel real for you anymore. And that's good, because you've extracted all the lessons you've needed to. And there's no need to carry any burden of shame or regret or hate or anger. That was just holding you back. To see a future where it's not holding you back anymore. In your career, socially, emotionally, see a version of you living without that baggage. And it doesn't have to be a miracle where everything changes. See incremental progress. You can smile a bit more, do different things, live more of the life that you deserve. And when you see that change unfolding, let me know by nodding your head. You deserve the life that you would have had without these things happening to you. You didn't choose it, but you can accept it. You can accept that what has happened was not right, and you can accept that a future that you deserve is now possible for you. And I want you to step into that feeling of acceptance and forgiveness. And when from head to toe you fully accept and forgive yourself, and you're ready to start that new chapter of a future, a bright future that you deserve, let me know by nodding your head. And I want you to return to the present, feeling a sense of peace, acceptance, forgiveness, but also a desire to make up for lost time, to do and live the life that you've always deserved. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Just wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, get a sense that all parts of you are returning to the present, listening to my voice, as I count from 1 to 10 to awaken you. Starting to count. 1, 2, 3, waking up. 4, 5, 6, more alert. 7, 8, open your eyes, open your eyes. 9, 10, wide awake, wide awake, wide awake.
Thank you for listening to The Hypnotist with Adam Cox, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. To automatically receive the latest episodes, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, please share this episode with just one friend you think it could help. And if this episode helped you, please leave us a 5-star review.